Hello, today I'll be doing a video on the board game Dungeon Quest. This is 3rd edition. I believe there was one more edition after this, the revised edition, where they changed up the combat a little bit. And then there was some previous versions done by different game companies, but this is the version that I'll be talking about. Came out in 2010. And let's get started with how to set up and play. Alright, first thing you'll do is place the game board in the center of the play area. Next you'll place all your dungeon chamber tiles somewhere near the board, kind of mixed up, or you can put them in the lid of the game box or in a bowl, however you want. Just somewhere where you can draw them without seeing what chamber you're actually drawing. Next you'll shuffle your dungeon deck, that's the cards with these back, place them on their space on the board. You'll do the same with the crypt deck, and we'll do that with all of the other decks: corpse, door, search, trap, treasure, and catacombs. Alright, so as you can see we've got all those decks shuffled and placed on their indicated spots on the game board. Next you shuffle the combat deck and just place that somewhere near the board, and shuffle the dragon deck and place that somewhere near the board. Each of the 5 monster types has a set of 4 power cards, so you separate those and just place them somewhere near the board. You've got demon, troll, golem, skeleton, and sorcerer. Next you place the sun token on the first space of the sun track at the top of the board. You take the monster tokens that are associated with each type of monster. They've got a matching image to their power cards. So again, sorcerer, skeleton, golem, troll, and demon. These monster tokens have a value on one side that shows their life value when they're in combat. So you'll randomize those and place them somewhere near the board where all players can reach. Place your wound tokens. You've got values of 5 and 1, determination tokens, and catacomb entrance tokens. You'll place those in a supply somewhere near the board. You can then randomly deal a hero card to each player, or if agreed upon, each player can choose a hero that they want to play and place that hero card in front of them. Players will then take the associated plastic figure, the matching travel marker, and the 4 power cards. They have an image that match the character. Take the 4 power cards that go with that character. Each character has a special ability and then some flavor text, and then they have attributes: strength, agility, armor, and luck, and we'll talk more about that, how it comes into play. Oh, and their health value, and we'll talk about how all that comes into play as we get into how to play the game. I'm setting up for a 3-player game, so I've got Lindell, Chalara, and Bright Blaze. I guess she's got like a little lizard, and Krutzbeck. Any hero cards and power cards that were not used, were not selected by the players, will go back in the box and won't be used in the game. The game does come with 4 die. Each player will roll 1 die, and the highest roll will be the first player. In case of a tie, you re-roll. I'm just going to make my player over here the first player, and then they get the first player token, and play will go in clockwise order after that. Next you'll shuffle the rune deck. Each player will draw 1 rune card. This is like a one-time ability. Once you use it, you discard it. So for instance, this player got discarded at the start of any combat round. Move up to 3 cards from your damage stack into your opponent's damage stack. And you'll understand what that means more when we talk about combat. But let's give 1 rune card to each player. That goes face up in their play area. All the other rune cards that were not drawn just go back in the box. The first player then takes his plastic miniature and places it in one of the 4 tower rooms of his choice. So for instance, we'll have this player place this there. Then in clockwise order, the other players will place their figures. 2 players cannot start in the same tower room. So we'll have maybe this guy starts here, and finally this figure, maybe they start in this tower room. After that, we've completed setup, so now let's move on to how to play. Alright, so how do we play? So starting with the first player, the first thing they do on every turn except for the very first turn of the game, they move the sun marker 1 space up on the track, but you don't do that on the first turn. And then this is kind of a timer that determines, when the players will lose, and we'll talk more about that later. But again, the first player on every turn other than the first turn will move the sun marker 1 space along the track. Then the first player will take their turn, and what a player can do on their turn normally is either move to an adjacent space or search, if it's a space that can be searched. Now the tower rooms that the players start in cannot be searched, so on a player's first turn they can only move into an unexplored space because there's no explored spaces already. So when you move into an adjacent unexplored space, you can never move diagonally. So for instance, the first player here, his only options are to this space and this space. And what he'll do is draw a tile, any of the dungeon tiles, grab that, place it face down. You place it so that the arrow is pointing from the direction you are moving from. So in this case, we would put it here, and the player would move into this dungeon chamber and then encounter this chamber. So any of these chambers that have a silver arrow, when you enter a chamber with that, you will draw a dungeon card and then just do what it said. So when you encounter this chamber, you draw a dungeon card. It says dungeon deck, and just read what it says. For instance, this one says dead adventurer, so you found a dead adventurer in this room. You may search the body for treasure. If you choose to do so, you draw 1 corpse card. So then you just put this in the discard deck for the dungeon, and then if you want to search the body for treasure, it says you draw a corpse card, so you would come over here to the corpse deck and draw that. And this one happens to say empty. The corpse does not possess anything of value. Nothing happens. But good things or bad things, normally bad things happen more often than good things. But that would end that player's turn. Then you would go to the next player and they would move or search. Again, when you haven't moved out of the tower rooms, you can't search, so the only thing you could do is move. And at the beginning, most of the spaces, or all the spaces, are unexplored, so all these players would have to draw a tile and move. But let's look at this space. So on a future turn, if it comes back to the first player's turn again, now because this space has this torch icon on it, instead of moving, they could choose to search. So if a dungeon chamber you are in has that torch icon, you can choose to search it. And to search it, you draw a card from the search deck and just do whatever it says. In this case, it's giant centipede. Roll 2 dice to determine how many wounds the giant centipede inflicts. So in that case, this player would have to take 2 dice, roll them, and that would be terrible because they would take 9 wounds. So you'd take 9 worth of wound tokens, and they can only take 15. So that would be a pretty terrible outcome. But I'll just mention, in this game, most outcomes end up being terrible. You don't usually, you're going to die more often than you're going to survive in this game. So if this player came back to his turn again on his turn he could move or search again, but then he could not stay in this room on a future turn and search this dungeon chamber for a third time. So you can only search a dungeon chamber twice, and then you're forced to move. Now you could move and then come back to this dungeon chamber and then be able to search it up to 2 times again, but after you search the dungeon chamber twice, you have to move out. Let's look at another type of dungeon chamber that a player might run into when they are moving. Let's say, for example, this player decided to move. Now you can see they have 2 options. They can move this way or this way. So we'll say on their next turn they decided to move and they drew this tile. That's a trap tile. So if a tile has this icon and this skull and crossbones, you have to move in there, but you've sprung a trap. So in that case, you come over here and draw the top card from the trap deck. And we'll read this one. Poisonous snakes. Roll 1 die to determine how many wounds the poisonous snakes would inflict. So you roll 1 die. Now remember, he would already, if we were just playing with this guy, he would have already had 9 from our previous giant centipede. And let's just see if he rolls again. He would have 4 more. He would have 13 damage. He would barely be alive. Now if it came back to this player's turn again, he can move out and move into one of these 2 unexplored spaces, since he's got corridors leading either way. Or he could move back into this chamber, but when he moved back into this chamber, he would have to draw from the dungeon deck. So you do have to encounter the dungeon chamber anytime you move into it, not just the first time you move into it. Like if he moved back into this chamber again on a future turn, he would have to draw another trap card. Alright, let's look at some other tile dungeon chambers that you might run into. Okay, let's say this guy decided to move here, so he would draw a tile. Again, you place the arrow the direction you're moving from. He would place it here. He would move into this room, and he would have to draw a dungeon deck. But you'll notice that 2 of the directions that this player can move in the future on a future turn have doors. So on a future turn, again, he could search, because this does have the torch icon, so he could spend his turn to search instead of move. Or if he decided to move, he could move to this unexplored space by just drawing a dungeon chamber tile. But if he wanted to move to this unexplored space or this unexplored space, because there's a door there, he would have to draw from the door deck first. So if he said he wanted to move here, because there's a door, he would have to draw from the door deck. And in this case, it says move through the door into the adjacent space. So then he'd be able to draw a dot tile and place it and move through without issue. But for example, he could have drawn this door jammed, the door will not open, and your turn immediately ends. On your next turn, you may try the door again or leave by a different passage, and then he would have had to stay in there. He wouldn't have got to draw that tile. He would have just had to, his turn would have ended, and he would have to try again by drawing a door card if he wanted to move through one of these doors again, or he could move through a passage that doesn't have a door. So many of them it just says the door's open and you get to move on and draw a dungeon chamber, but some of them do not. Alright, let's look at another type of tile. For instance, we'll say this player wanted to move here into this unexplored space, and we'll say he drew this dungeon chamber. Now you'll see the arrow, pointing this way. You'll see there's actually a portcullis, so he can't just move into that room so easily, because there's a portcullis. He's got to try to lift that, and so he's got to test his strength. So now is probably a good time to talk about attribute tests. So there may be some cards, something that happens, or for instance like this, running into a portcullis, there's something where you end up having to test one of your attributes, in this case strength, but other ones may say test your luck, test your agility, etc. So whenever you need to make a strength test, like this one, he needs to test strength. You look at your character's strength, which for this character is 6. You roll 2 dice. If you roll higher than your attribute, so if I roll higher than a strength of 6, I fail the test. If I roll equal to or less than my attribute, in this case 6 for strength, then I'm successful. So if I rolled here, I got an 8. So I would fail the strength test, I wouldn't lift the portcullis, and my turn would end and I would have to stay in this room, and I could try again later. Now, when you fail an attribute test, you get to take a determination token, and the next time you attempt that same attribute test, it adds 1 for every token. So my strength would be 7 then if I decided on my next turn I wanted to try to move into this room again and test to lift the portcullis. I rolled a 7. My strength is 7 because I have the determination token. So I would successfully lift that portcullis and move into this room. And then I would have to draw a dungeon card. Now if I had failed again, maybe if I had rolled an 8, well, then I would take another determination token, and that would now be adding 2 to my strength test. Once you successfully pass the ability test that you're trying, the attribute test that you're trying to pass, you do have to discard the determination tokens that you've drawn. And if I would want to move back into this chamber again in the future, I would again have to try to lift that portcullis to move in here. If you had been in this room, and for instance this tile is here, first you'd have to draw a door card and successfully open the door, and then you would still have to do an attribute test to try to lift the portcullis before you could move into this room. Alright, let's look at another type of dungeon chamber you might encounter. We'll say this hero wants to move onto this space on their turn. They draw a dungeon chamber, and it looks something like this. It's got a yellow arrow. If it's got a yellow arrow, that is a corridor. You don't draw a dungeon card, but you must immediately move again. So now he would have to determine if he wants to move here, here, or here. We'll just say he wants to move here, so now he'll immediately draw another dungeon chamber. So maybe he draws this one. Again, you put the arrow the direction you're moving from. He would move in here, and now he would have to draw a dungeon card and encounter this dungeon chamber again on his next turn, because it has the torch icon. Instead of choosing to move, this player could search by drawing a card from the search deck. And then on a future turn, if he decides to move, he could come back this way. Again, if he comes in here, he does have to draw a dungeon card. If he goes back this way, he would be back into the corridor, so he would immediately have to move again, either in here or move to one of these unexplored spaces. Alright, we'll look at another type of dungeon chamber you might draw. Let's say this player on a future turn wanted to move into this unexplored space from this chamber, and they drew this dungeon chamber tile. Again, you have to put the arrow the direction you're moving from. This is a chamber of darkness, and when you move into it, you must immediately move again. You roll a die, and you can see on a 1 to 3, you would immediately move back into this room. On a 4 to 6, you would draw another tile, dungeon chamber, and place it here and immediately move into and encounter that room. We'll say he rolled a die and got a 4 to 6 and has to move into this room, and he drew this dungeon chamber. This, unfortunately, is a bottomless pit. So when you enter this room, you have to test your luck to see if you can make it jumping across the bottomless pit. So as soon as you enter there, you test your luck. And for instance, in this example, Lyndall's luck is 5, so again, that's an attribute test. He would roll 2 dice, and he rolled a 10. He would fail. If you fail moving across a bottomless pit, you fall in and you die, so you're just immediately killed. That's it for you in the game. If you're successful, then you successfully jump across the bottomless pit. You just stay there, and then you take your next turn as normal. So we'll pretend he was successful and did not fall into the bottomless pit, so he can continue moving, and we can show some other dungeon chamber types. So you can see on his next turn he can't search, so he has to move. So we'll say he decides he has no, well, he could move here or he could move back into this room. But we'll say he decides to move here, so he draws a new dungeon chamber, and he draws this one. And he moves into this room. Now when he moves into this room, he has to draw a dungeon card from the dungeon deck to encounter it. But you'll notice it has a brown arrow, and it's got like this little ladder going down. That means it has a entrance to the catacombs. So on his next turn, he could continue moving just as normal, move into this unexplored space by drawing a dungeon tile or encountering it, or he could decide he wants to enter the catacombs. So let's talk about entering the catacombs. Alright, so as previously mentioned, sometimes you may enter a dungeon chamber that has a printed entrance to the catacombs on it. Some card effect may forcibly make you enter the catacombs. Some effects may make you place a catacomb entrance in on a dungeon chamber that doesn't have a pre-printed chamber entrance in it. So if you come onto one of those, or one of these that has a pre-printed entrance, you have the option, instead of moving or searching, you have the option of entering the catacombs. So if this figure moved in here, he would encounter this chamber as we talked about earlier. He would encounter it normally. He would have to draw a dungeon card, and that would end his turn after he resolved the effects of that dungeon card. On his next turn, he could move or search, or he could decide he's going to enter the catacombs. If you decide you're going to enter the catacombs, you take your travel marker, place it where it's pointing in the direction you're going to want to move in the catacombs. You won't be able to change your mind later, so maybe he decides he wants to be moving this way, and you just take your figure and put it back on your hero sheet, and that will end that turn. On the next turn, you are in the catacombs, so instead of moving or searching, what you need to do is draw a card from the catacombs deck and resolve it. So in this case, it just says empty, the room is empty, nothing happens. You'll keep this card, and that will end your turn. On your next turn, you're still in the catacombs, you haven't found an exit yet, so you'll draw another catacombs card. This one happens to say hole in the roof. Test agility. If you succeed, you may exit the catacombs. If you fail, you may test again on your next turn instead of drawing a catacombs card. If you have a rope, you may discard it to automatically succeed. So that is a way to get out of the catacombs. There are other exits, but a lot of them won't be exits. They'll be encounters. You may encounter some sort of creature or something like that. But let me give it a little better example here. Let's say this player had taken 3 turns in the catacombs. He had drawn 3 cards, and then on his 4th turn in the catacombs, he drew this one, the hole in the roof. So we'll say now he wants to exit. So it says to test agility. His agility is a 6. He would roll with 2 dice. He fails. He'll get to take a determination token. And so when it comes back to his next turn, he'll test again. This time his agility is 7 because he's got the determination token. He rolls a 4, so he would pass. So now he'll get to exit the catacombs. So to determine where you're going to resurface in the dungeon, you count the number of catacomb cards you drew, and you move in the direction you placed your arrow that many spaces. So he drew 4 catacomb cards, so he would move 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you have to choose direction left or right. Now in this case there's a wall left, so he couldn't go left. So he chooses right, and then you roll a single die and you move that many spaces in that direction. So again, we were 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he would have to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is where he would resurface. So that's where your plastic figure will be placed. Of course, if you resurface in an unexplored space, you have to draw a dungeon tile, and you can place the arrow in any direction you want. So for instance, if he places it that one, he places his figure there. You don't encounter the dungeon space on the turn that you resurface. That just ends your turn once you place the tile. But on your next turn, instead of moving or searching, you have to encounter the dungeon chamber. And you do that instead of moving or searching, so that's basically your turn. Your next turn after resurfacing, you encounter the dungeon. In this case, you draw a dungeon card, and that would be your entire turn. If you end up resurfacing in an area that already has a dungeon chamber, again, your turn immediately ends. And then you will, at the beginning of your next turn, instead of moving or searching, you just encounter that chamber. Oh, and I forgot, you, of course, pick up your travel marker after you resurface. If you're when you're determining where you're going to resurface in the dungeon, you know, you've drawn so many cards that would take you past the wall of the dungeon, then you just stop at the wall. And just like when I was determining if I could go left or right after I moved as many spaces as I could in the direction of the arrow, if, for instance, I had been over here and I decided, well, I'm going to choose left, and I rolled a 5, I would only be able to go to here, and then I would have to resurface there. After you've resurfaced, you take all the catacomb cards that you accumulated and shuffle them back into the catacomb deck, unless they are any cards like loot cards that say for you to keep them, then you'll keep those. And of course, any catacomb loot cards that you've kept do not count. If you happen to enter the catacombs again, they do not count towards your total of direction of movement when you exit the catacombs. Only the ones you accumulated since you entered the catacombs a second time or a future time. There's just a few more types of dungeon chambers we haven't talked about. If you were here and you decided you were going to move, you know, in this direction, and you drew this dungeon chamber and moved in there, well, first you would encounter it. You would draw a dungeon card. But you cannot cross this chasm, so you would have to, on a future turn when you want to leave, you would either have to leave back the way you came, or exit it through the same side of the chasm that you entered on. So in this case, this player could either go back this way or move to this unexplored space by drawing a tile and moving there. He could not cross the chasm and exit out one of these sides. Another type you might run into is one like this that's basically just a dead end. When you enter it, you encounter it by drawing a dungeon card. Of course, you can search it since it has the torch icon. On a turn you could search it instead of moving, but there's no way to exit out of it other than going back the direction you came. Of course, you couldn't have got from there to here. You could have said there, it would have been placed there. So if you'd moved in here, then the only way you can move is here, and this would be a dead end. So this player would end up having to go back and go a different direction because he couldn't cross this chasm, and this is a dead end. Now, of course, when you search, you can sometimes find a secret passage or secret exit which would let you get out of there, but otherwise you would have to go back. Another type of dungeon chamber you might encounter looks like this, has the green arrow, it's got all this rubble. That is a cave-in. When you move in there, you do draw a dungeon card. On your next turn, you can either retreat and go back the way you came, or you can attempt to get through by doing an agility test. If you manage to pass the agility test, again, you'd be testing your agility, in this case for this character 6. If you pass, then you move on and draw a new dungeon chamber or move into the adjacent chamber as normal. If you fail, then you have to stay there, and on your next turn you have the choice to attempt to cross again or retreat. Another type of dungeon chamber you might run into is the spider web. When you enter the spider web, you do not have to draw a dungeon card, but you either have to immediately retreat back to the chamber from whence you came, or you can attempt to cross the spider web, but if you do, you have to pass a strength test. If you fail the strength test, well, if you succeed at the strength test, then you can move into one of the adjacent chambers immediately, just as normal, a normal move. If you fail, you're stuck in the spider web, and you don't, on your next turn, you don't have the option to retreat. You must keep attempting a strength test until you pass it, and then can move out in one of the directions. And I think we've covered most of them, except for the rotating room. If you move into unexplored space and draw the rotating room, when you move in there, it rotates 180 degrees. It won't rotate again. It only rotates once, so it's only the first time somebody moves into it. It rotates 180 degrees. You don't draw a dungeon card on your next turn, then you would exit out. If it happened that there was a room here already, it wouldn't exactly be placed like this, but if there was a room here like this and it rotated where now you have no exit because you're facing a wall, then on your turn you can search and hopefully you find a passage down to the catacombs or a secret door out. If you don't, after you only can search in a room 2 turns in a row, so on your second search, if you don't find a exit out of there, either a passage down or a secret passage, by the time you search the second time, then you're just trapped there and your character's dead and eliminated. Alright, I think I've covered most of the dungeon chamber types. There may be 1 or 2 that I missed, and if so, maybe it'll come up when we do our examples of play. What we haven't talked about is encountering monsters. So, as I mentioned, as you're moving through the catacombs or moving through the dungeons, and you're drawing a dungeon and you're drawing cards from the dungeon deck, you may encounter a monster. And if so, you can try to escape, or you can attack. If you fail to escape, you'll have to attack anyway. So let's talk about encountering monsters and combat. Alright, so for example, if your character was here, and on your turn you decided to move into this unexplored space, and you drew this tile, you place the arrow like so, and move into the space. And then you would have to encounter that space, so you would draw a dungeon card, and in this example, it says Golem Monster. So as you can see, it says you may attack or try to escape. If you attack or fail to escape, you must resolve a combat. So here we have a monster encounter. So the player to the left of the player who encountered the monster will take on the role basically of fighting for and being the monster during this encounter. So they'll take the 4 encounter cards that go along with, or the 4 power cards that go along with that monster, so in this case a golem. So our player to the left would take the 4 power cards, shuffle them up, and place them face down in their player area. They then, at random, draw one of the corresponding monster tokens. They can look at it and put it in their play area, but they want to keep the value hidden from the other player, because that is going to be the life value of this monster. So in this case, they put the token down in their play area, so they've got the power cards and the token for that monster. The hero character now determines if he wants to try to escape or go ahead and attack. Now, if the room he moved into had a portcullis on any of the, that he came through, he cannot escape. Or if he entered the room through a secret passage, then he can't escape. But otherwise, he can say if he wants to try to escape or just attack. So just so we can have an example of escape, we'll say the player decides he wants to try to escape. So if the hero wants to try to escape, he'll take his power cards and shuffle them and randomly draw one. So he will randomly draw one and look at the escape value. That's the white number in the bottom left of the power card. Now the player playing for the monster draws a card from the shuffle deck to look at its escape value. In this case it's a 4 because it is higher than the hero's escape value. The hero does not escape. And on top of that, because he didn't escape, he has to take a number of damage equal to the black number. So the hero will have to take 3 damage and then still go ahead and combat the monster. Now, if the hero's escape value was higher than the monster's, then he would escape. So if he had escaped, he would move back into the room from which he entered, and his turn would immediately end. And then at the beginning of his next turn, he would have to encounter this room by drawing a dungeon card. But after he moves back out of that room, the monster token that was drawn is placed in that room, and now that monster is in that room, and if any hero ends up moving into that room, they have to encounter that monster. But in our case, the hero did not escape, so he's going to have to take 3 damage. So you just put 3 damage on his card. That's what he got for failing to escape. So the black number did 3 wounds, and now he'll have to combat the monster anyway. So during the first round of combat, both the hero player and the monster player will draw one of their power cards into their hand. They can't use, if an escape attempt was done, like in our case, they cannot draw one of those power cards. So they'll draw from one of their remaining power cards. So we'll say the hero draws this power card into his hand, and the monster is going to draw this power card into his hand. Then they draw up to their hand limit of 5 from the combat deck. So they'll already have 1 in their hand from their power card in the first round of combat. And so they'll each draw 4 cards. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a shared deck, so the monster will draw from this same deck. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember, it's only in the first round of combat that they get to draw a power card. Next, each of the players, the hero and the monster, will choose one of their combat cards. This is the attack value up in the top, and they'll place it face down in front of themselves. Now this is the power card. It does have a special ability. For instance, this one is you may discard this card and replace it with another combat card from your hand. But we'll say our hero is going to play this one, so they play it face down in front of themselves. This player playing for the monster looks at their cards. Well, they have one with an attack value 5, so they decide they're going to play that. They play that face down in front of themselves. Then both players will reveal their cards simultaneously. So our hero played a 3. Our monster played a 5. Now, if one of the players' attack value is less than or equal to the other player's attack value, and their counterattack symbol, which in this case is here, if it matches the same value as the attack that was played by their opponent, they can counterattack, and we'll see how that works in a little bit. But in this case, his counterattack symbol is this red axe, and this monster's attack is a yellow magic, so the counterattack symbol does not match, so he cannot make a counterattack, and the monster's card doesn't even have a counterattack symbol. So in this case, the monster's attack value is greater than the player's attack value. So the monster won this round of combat. They take their attack card and put it in the opponent's damage stack. So this will be the opponent's damage stack. Every card in that opponent's damage stack counts as 1 damage. So right now this hero has the, I thought we put 3 in here. Well, we should have. So he's got 3 damage plus the 1 from the attack he just took. So he's got a total of 4 damage. That still doesn't equal his health, so he's not dead. The card that the loser of the combat round played does not go in a damage stack since they didn't win that round of combat. It goes in a combat stack. We'll just put it right here, and that can be used by players later, as we'll see as we continue to talk about combat. So now we go on to another round of combat. So both players will drop their hand back up to their hand limit of 5 combat cards. They each just played 1 card, so they'll each draw 1 card into their hand. So we'll say our hero chooses this card and places it face down in front of him. And we'll have our monster player choose this card and place it face down in front of themselves. So they'll both reveal. The monster reveals an attack value of 3, a ranged attack, that's the attack. This is the counter attack, so it did a ranged attack with a value of 3. Our hero did a ranged attack with a value of 4. So he's winning the combat. Now he did a melee attack, but the counter attack value, he did a ranged attack, but the counter attack value on this card is a melee, so he doesn't get to make a counter attack. If the opponent had done a melee attack instead of a ranged attack, then he would get to make a counter attack. And again, we'll show an example of that here in a minute. But what we can show an example of, if the winner of the attack plays a combat, an attack type that matches any of the attack types of cards in the combat stack, which is where the loser of the previous round puts their cards. So in this case, the winner is the hero because he played a 4 ranged, and this one only played a 3 ranged, so the hero is the winner, and the attack type he did does match an attack type of a combat card in the stack. He gets to take that and add that to his damage that he's going to do to the opponent. And those cards, because they won the combat, will go in the opponent's damage stack. So that's doing, he's got 2 in his damage stack now. Well, we'll put his damage stack over here. Now the one that the loser played goes into the combat stack. So the monster has 2 damage. The hero or the player controlling him knows he can take 4 damage. And our hero over here has 3 plus 1, 4 damage, but he can take 15. So now we'll go on to another round of combat. They both played 1 card, so they both draw 1 card into their hand of combat cards. Alright, so now they decide what they're going to play this time. So we'll say our hero decides to draw and play this card face down. The player playing for the monster decides to draw and play this card face down. Alright, so they reveal. This guy did a 3 melee attack. They reveal this guy did a 2 ranged attack. He does have a special ability where he could discard this card and place it with another combat card, but he doesn't want to do that. So he only did a 2. This one did a 3, so this one's winning. But this one does have a counter attack symbol that matches the symbol of the attack this player did. So if he has any other cards in his hand with the same counterattack symbol, he can play them until his value is equal to or greater than his opponent. So this one has the same counterattack symbol, so he can play that. Now he's got a total of 4, which beats the opponent. And the opponent can't counterattack a counterattack. And so this guy is now the winner of the combat, and if he played a combat card that matches any attack type in the combat stack, which he did, he gets to add that card to the damage as well. So now all three of these will go into the monster's damage stack. This would go into the combat stack. But now the monster has 5 damage, so this player controlling the monster has to say, you've defeated the monster. His health was only 4. Now, since our hero won, he does have to convert any cards in his damage stack to actual wounds. So he just had 1, so he does have to place another wound on it in his card. This being a power card that belonged to the monster just goes back into his power cards along with all of his other power cards. And if those need to be used again, they'll be shuffled up. The monster token is just placed back and randomized back amongst the other monster tokens of that type. The hero will get his power card back. That will get placed in his hand of 4 power cards. All other combat cards that were used in the combat will just be shuffled back into the combat deck. Now, if the monster had won that combat, then the hero is killed and out of the game. His figure is placed back. Any cards he has in his play area are returned to their respective decks, and his character card is just flipped over, and he's, pretty much out of the game. And since the monster wasn't defeated, his token, instead of being shuffled back in with the monster tokens, would be placed in the chamber where he defeated the hero, and so another player may in the future move into there and have to encounter that monster. And his damage stack does not remain. As I said, his cards get shuffled back into the combat deck, so when that monster would be faced again, it would start fresh with its full health. So that's how combat works. I think I never played any of the other versions, but I think a lot of people thought combat is too convoluted for this kind of simple move and draw card game. I think the older version just had some sort of rock, paper, scissors combat, and I believe they went back to that in the revised edition of this version. So I think this version, the 3rd edition, is the only one with this more complicated combat. So I think the only thing we haven't talked about is the treasure chamber, which is printed on the board. So trying to kind of get map tiles to go to any one of the entrances to the treasure chamber, and that allow you to enter it. Now the treasure chamber is the only chamber where more than one hero can occupy at the same time. So normally 2 heroes cannot ever be in the same dungeon chamber. As I said, the exception is the treasure chamber. There is a couple of other times that it is allowed. I think the other times that it is allowed is if you exit the catacombs and you happen to exit the catacombs in a chamber where another player is, that's allowed. And I think if somehow the circumstance occurred where if you escaped from a monster and moved in, retreated or escaped into a chamber where there was another player, you're allowed to do that. But otherwise, normally you cannot move into the same chamber as another player. But let's talk about if on your turn you move into the treasure chamber. When you enter the treasure chamber, you get to draw 1 card from the dragon deck and look at it. In this case, it says the dragon is sleeping. You get to draw 2 treasure cards. On the next turn, you may either exit the treasure chamber or stay and draw another dragon card. So we get to draw 2 treasure cards. That one gave us 290 loot, and this one gave us 3,000 loot. Those would go into our player area. Now, as it says, on your next turn, you could stay and draw another dragon card, but there's not a whole lot of dragon cards in this, not a lot of cards in this deck, and if you get one that shows the dragon awakens, like this one, you have to discard all your treasure cards, then roll 2 dice and suffer that many wounds. So that could be very bad. And then If you survive, you must immediately move out of the treasure chamber. So you can move out. This treasure chamber counts as one space, so you can move out into any of the directions. And as you can see, it also says all other heroes in the treasure chamber also suffer the effects of the dragon rage in clockwise order. So if there were other players in this chamber also looting, and somebody drew the dragon rage, everybody in there has to lose all their treasure cards and roll 2 dice and suffer that many wounds. So not good for sure if you take too many chances of drawing treasure cards and risk waking the dragon and getting the dragon rage. I believe your chance on your first draw is 1 in 8. But then after that, of course, that card's out. So now the chance of your next draw, or another player that comes in and draws, your chances are 1 in 7 of getting the dragon rage. So every time you hunt, your odds get a lot better that you're going to draw that rage. And if you do decide to leave on your next turn, as I said, you can go out any passage. So if you go out one of these, you would just be moving into an unexplored space like normal, or you can go back the way you came. Now there are other ways to get loot. You can get some pretty good loot in the catacombs, and even get some loot. Some of the dungeon deck cards or corpse cards or other cards, search cards, may give you some loot, but the best loot is in the treasure room or in the catacombs. But anyway, let's talk about how you win the game. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of when it's the first player's turn, every turn it is the first player's turn except for the first turn. He will move this sun track, along the sun track. When it gets to this space, he will have to roll a die, and if he gets anything greater than a 1, then everything is okay. Then on the next turn, if he gets a 1 or 2, if he gets anything greater than a 2, all is well. But if he ever rolls the numbers shown, or the numbers shown, here a 1 or a 2, or a 1, 2, or 3, or here a 1, 2, 3, 4, or even on the last space, a 1 through 5, if ever that number or a number in that range is rolled, then the dungeon automatically closes for the night, and anybody still in the dungeon is killed. So you want to get out, get in, get whatever loot you can get, and get back out by reaching one of the tower rooms. Now you don't have to go back out the tower room you came in. You can exit as long as you can get to any of the other tower rooms. You can exit. So as long as you get into the tower room and exit the dungeon, when you get in there, you can make the choice to exit. Of course, you don't have to exit. You could go back in again. But as soon as if you do make the choice to exit, then there's no getting back in. So once you exit, you're done. Whatever loot you have is what you're going to have. Once either all the heroes exit, or or any heroes that are still alive exit, before the timer gets to the end and rolls one of those numbers. If they get out and manage to exit, once all the surviving heroes manage to make it out, then they compare their total loot, and whoever has the most loot is the winner. Of course, most times, most of the players, or almost all the players, don't make it out. If of the surviving players, they have any of them tie for the most loot value or gold value, then the player with the single highest, amongst the tied players, the one with the single highest loot card would be the winner. If there's still a tie, then the player who has the most loot cards amongst the tied players would be the winner. And if it was still a tie, then those tied players would just share the win. But that pretty much covers how to play Dungeon Quest. I'll set everything back up to how it was right after setup, and we'll go through a few example turns. Alright, everything should be set back how it was right after we did setup. So we begin with our first player. They're the ones with the first player marker, and they Can't search, obviously, since they're in their tire. Let me put that marker back here. We don't move that on the first turn. So our first player will decide, we'll say that he's going to decide to go up this way into this unexplored. So he will draw, and right away, not good. So he will move in there, and he will have to draw a trap deck card. Let's see what he got. Poisonous gas, trap. Roll 1 die and subtract 3 from the result to determine how many wounds the gas inflicts. Then roll 1 die and subtract 3 from the result to determine how many turns you lose. Oh no. Alright, so 6 minus 3, that means we're going to get 3 wounds. So 1, 2, 3. And now we got to see how many turns we're going to lose. Okay, so subtract 3. I guess we won't lose any turns. Alright, now we go on to our second player, who is Krutzbeck over here. And we'll say that he decides he's going to move over here. So he'll draw this dungeon chamber. Now that's a corridor, so the yellow arrow, so he'll immediately have to move again. So he'll need to draw another tile. We'll say he draws this one. And he will move into this room. And now he will encounter that room by drawing a dungeon deck card. And he got a razor wing thread. Roll 1 die and subtract 2 from the result to determine how many wounds the razor wing inflicts. Alright. So he's got to take 4 wounds. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's going to end his turn. Alright, now we move on to our third player, Chalara and Bright Blaze. She will decide to go this way, so she'll draw a dungeon tile, and oh wait, that's a portcullis, so she's got to make a strength test before she can move in there. So her strength is 5. Probably going to fail that one. Oh, no, she's successful. So she will move in and then encounter the dungeon. So she'll draw a card. Dead Adventurer. You may search the body for treasure. If you choose to do so, draw 1 corpse card. We'll say that she's going to do that. So she'll draw from the corpse deck. She got a rope. You may discard the rope when you encounter a trapdoor or hole in the roof to automatically succeed at your skill test. Okay, she will just keep that in her player area. Alright, we're back to our first player. They now have to advance the sun on the sun track, and they get to take their turn. So there's no search icon there, so they can't search. So we'll say that he's going to move this way. So he'll draw this dungeon tile. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. What kind of luck is that? Another trap. Alright, so he's got to draw from the trap deck. And he gets Cave In. Keep this card at the start of each of your turns. Test agility to cross the cave in. If you succeed, discard this card and continue your turn as normal. If you fail, your turn immediately ends. Alright, we come to our second player just to show something different. This is a searchable room, so instead of moving this turn, Krutzbeck is going to search, so he draws from the search deck. And he got empty. The room is empty. Nothing happens. So nothing too good for him. And now we'll move on to Chalara and Bright Blaze. There is a torch on here. She could search if she wanted to, but she's going to move. So let's draw here. And she moves in. Oops. Alright, we're in a Chamber of Darkness, so we have to immediately move again, rolling a die, determining which direction we move. We got a 3 or 4. Because that takes us in the direction of a wall, we roll again. Same thing. Let's try. How could I roll? How can I roll 3 3s in a row? A 5. Okay, so we're going to move this way. So we're going to draw a tile, and lovely. It is a room. This rotates 180 degrees. Luckily, she is not going to be blocked by a wall on her next turn, but that ends her turn. She doesn't encounter anything there. So we come back to our first player. They have to advance the sun token, and now they get to take their turn. Hopefully, he does not draw another trap, So we'll come over here. Let's dig to the bottom. Maybe he's going to get this one. And that one has an entrance to go down into the catacombs if he wants to on the next turn. But for now, he'll enter here. He does have to draw a dungeon card, so we'll see what he got. Passage down. Place a catacomb entrance marker on this chamber. Next turn you may enter the catacombs if you wish. Well, we have to draw the catacomb entrance marker because we drew this, but because there's already one on this tile, we can just discard this out of the game. But somewhere in the rules or a fact I read that even if the tile has an entrance on it, you have to draw this just so, because there's a limited number determined by the card. So I'll just discard this one from the supply, but we've got a catacomb entrance marker already on that tile, and that's going to end that player's turn. Alright, we come back to Krutzbeck here. He's right here. He's only searched this room once. He could search again if he wanted to. Remember, you can only search twice. And heck, let's just have him do it to show it. He's going to search again. He did find a secret door. You may immediately move to any adjacent space. If the space is unexplored, place a dungeon chamber as normal. If you encounter a monster, you cannot escape. So like he could move to an adjacent space here, even though there's a wall, because he found a secret door. But, well, let's just have him do it just for the heck of it. Of course, he could go here as well, but that really wouldn't be using the secret door. So we'll just show that he's using a secret door through this wall. We'll have him go here. We'll draw this tile. And that is bad for him. Bottomless pit. Krutzbeck has terrible, terrible luck. So if he doesn't succeed at this luck test, he's already done and out of the game. Come on, Snake Eyes. Nope. He fails. He's done. He's out of the game. He fell in the bottomless pit. His figure's removed. Discard his rune card there. Discard his wounds, flip his card over. He's done that quick. This game can be brutal. Alright, back to Chilara and Brightblaze. There's only one direction she can move. Now she could search here, but she's going to move, so we'll have her draw this dungeon chamber tile. She got this one. She moves in. Now there are doors, so when she moves out of there, she'll have to draw a door card. But she now has to encounter this dungeon room, and it's empty. The room is empty, nothing happens. Alright, we come back to Lyndall here. Now remember, he's got the catacomb entrance, so just to see how that works, I think he's going to decide to enter the catacombs. Oh, you know what? I forgot last time when I moved in here. I couldn't have done that. I had to, at the start of my turn, test my agility to cross the cave-in. So I should have done that before I drew that. So let me see if I can do this. I'll test my agility. It's 6. I got an 8. But I have this. After rolling dice for an attribute test, you may re-roll one of the dice and must accept the second result. So I'll re-roll this 5. And I get another 5. So I wouldn't have been able to move in there last time, so I wouldn't have drawn this tile. So we'll just set this aside. We'll do it again. Alright, so now it's this turn. So now he's trying to test again. Oh, but he gets a determination token, so now his agility is a 7. And he still fails, but he gets to re-roll 1 because he has that power, and he still fails. So that's going to end his turn. Oh, and he should have moved that. Alright, we come back to Chilara and Brightblaze. She's going to try to move this way, but there's a door, so she's got to draw a door card. Door jammed. The door will not open and your turn immediately ends. On your next turn, you may try the door again or leave by a different passage. Alright, we'll come back to Lyndall. He has 2 determination tokens now, so his agility is now 8. And he gets a 10, but again, with his power, he can re-roll 1 die. He gets That's an 11. Oh, and we forgot to move this again. Alright, back to Chalara and Bright Blaze. She's going to try to go out here again, so she will draw another door card. The door opens. She can move through to an adjacent space, so she'll draw a tile for here. And she gets this one, moves in, and has to draw a dungeon deck to encounter it. Crypt. You may search the crypt for treasure. If you choose to do so, draw one crypt card. She's going to do that. She'll draw a crypt card, and she found 20 gold coins. So she'll just put that in her play area. Oh, that's dead Krutzbeck. She'll put that in her play area down here. Alright, back to Lindell again. He's going to... Oh, he should have got another determination token. So he's now 9. And he rolls, and he gets a 6. So finally passes that. These determination tokens get discarded. This trap card gets discarded. And now he finally moves into that one that we got before. And he already got that encounter card. We'll just say, that's the one we drew before, which put the passage down, which he already had. So we'll just say that's where he is. I messed up when I didn't start with drawing that thing further back. So on his next turn, he will enter the catacombs. All right. We come back to Chalara and Bright Blaze. She's going to try to go, well, she's going to search. She's got a torch icon there. She can search. She's going to search, and she gets Unstable Potion. You may discard the potion at the start of your turn. Roll 2 dice. On a 2, you're killed. On a 3 to 4, suffer 6 wounds. On a 5 to 6, suffer 3 wounds. On a 7, no effect. On an 8 to 10 or 11 to 12, heal. Alright, so she'll just keep that for now. We come back to Lindell. We got to advance the sun track, and he's going to enter the catacombs. So he will place this. He'll point it in the direction where he's going to travel. He's going to travel that way. This will go back on his card. Alright, so we're going to we enter in the catacombs. We draw a catacombs card. See what we get. Naga threat. The passage is blocked by a giant Naga, and you must turn around. Determine where you would exit the catacombs. Then place your direction of travel marker in that space and rotate it 180 degrees so it faces the opposite direction. Discard the Naga and all your catacomb cards except loot. On your next turn, draw catacomb cards as normal. Alright, so I gotta determine where I would exit, so I would move 1 space in my direction of travel, which is just because I've only drawn 1 card. Then I gotta roll a die. I gotta choose right or left first. I'll choose this way. And I move 2 that way. That will be my space that I'll exit in. So I place my travel marker there, then it says to rotate it 180 degrees so it faces the opposite direction that it was. Then I discard this catacombs card, and on my next turn draw another catacombs card as normal. And I don't think I moved the sun token when I started his turn, so I'll do it now. We'll do a couple more turns. Alright. It's Chalara and Bright Blaze turn again. She's going to go here. So she'll draw it. And she got a passage down into the catacombs as well. But she has to encounter that chamber, so she'll draw this, and it's empty. So no issues for her. Alright, back to Lindell. I was hoping to at least get in 1 fight. We'll advance the sun marker, hopefully. I mean, I didn't forget that time. He's still in the catacombs, so he's going to draw a catacombs card. Roll 1, he got a razor wing threat. Roll 1 die and determine how many wounds the razor wing inflicts. 2. So he's got to get 2 more wings. Wounds. I'll just replace these 3 with a 5. He's got 5 wounds. He can take 15. And he keeps that card in his play area because remember the number of catacomb cards that you have is going to determine how many spaces you moved in a certain direction. That's going to be his turn. We'll go back to Chalara. Now, she could go down in the catacombs if she wanted to, but I don't think she wants to. So she's going to backtrack. She's going to move back in here. She does have to draw a dungeon card. Now let's see what she got. Torch goes out. Keep this card at the start of each turn. Test luck to relight your torch. If you succeed, discard this card and continue your turn as normal. If you fail, your turn immediately ends. Alright, so she'll keep that over here. Alright, back to Lyndall in the Catacombs. We got Advance the Sun track. He's got to draw another Catacombs card. He gets Sneak Attack. A golem suddenly attacks you. Test luck. If you fail, suffer a number of wounds equal to the amount you failed by. Whether you succeed or fail, you must then resolve a combat with the golem, but you must attack. You cannot escape. Alright, so first we got to test our luck. His luck is 5. And we got a 10. We can re-roll because it's one of his powers, but still the best we could do is a 6, so he's going to fail that. Well, but we want to see, we're going to get a number of wounds, so we want to roll, and we still get a 10. Alright, so we get a number of wounds equal to the amount we failed by. Well, we failed by 5 because we rolled a 10 and our luck is 5, so we get 5 more wounds. We're already 2/3 dead. Alright, and then we have to combat a golem, so this other player will take the golem cards and shuffle the golem's power cards up. They'll draw one of their power cards into their hand. The hero over here will shuffle their power cards and draw one. I'll just draw one at random. Okay, that's going to be one of their power cards into their hand. And then they got to draw up to 5, so 4 more. So 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. That's for the golem. Alright, so these are Lyndall's. Let's see what he wants to play. Well, he got this 4, so he'll play that face down in his play area. And let's see what the golem wants to play. Well, he got this 3, and this is his power card. And next round, add 2 to your attack value. So he's going to play that. All right, they both reveal. All right, so 4, no counter attack value. 3, no counter attack value. So Lyndall wins. So he'll put this in the. Oh, and I forgot to draw. Forgot to have the player draw a life value for this golem. All right, he got a 4. All right, so this is going to go in our combat stack. We'll just place that there. This is going to go in the hero or in the golem's damage stack. So he's got 1 wound. All right, they both got to draw back up to 5. So 1 for each of them. Now they'll choose a card to play. Alright, he got this 4 ranged attack, so he's going to play that face down. This guy, he's got this 3 ranged attack, he's going to play that face down. Alright, so they both reveal. He gets a 3, he has a 4, but he had the power from his last card next round, add 2 to your attack value. So his attack value is actually 5. He doesn't have a counterattack icon. He's winning, so he wouldn't get to counterattack anyway. And he doesn't get the card for a death blow because the attack type in the combat stack doesn't match the attack type he did. So anyway, he wins the combat. So this will go into the hero's damage stack. So we'll say that's here. This goes into the combat stack. So the hero has 1 damage, the monster has 1 damage, there's 2 cards in the combat stack. They each got to draw a card back into their hand to get up to 5, and now they'll pick again. So the hero, let's see what he has. He's going to play his power card, which only has a strength of 2, but it has an ability. You may switch this card with the card in your opponent's damage stack, so he's going to play that. Let's see what the golem is going to play. He's going to play this one. Alright, so they both reveal. He's playing a 4. He played a 2, but he's switching this card with a card in his opponent's damage stack, so he switches it for this one that's in the opponent's damage stack. So they both played a 4. Neither of them have counterattack. So in this case, both of their cards just go in the combat stack. Nobody takes any damage. And now they'll draw back up again. Alright, so our hero they are going to play, they'll play this cleaving blow. So of course they'll place that face down. Our golem player is going to play this rapid fire, so they'll place that face down. They both reveal. He played a 3 ranged. He played a 3 melee. They're tied right now, but the golem does have a counterattack symbol that matches the attack type that the hero played. So if he has any others that have the same counterattack symbol, which he does, he can play those until he exceeds the attack value of the opponent, which is just 1. That puts him an attack value of 5 against the hero players of 3. So he will end up winning the combat, but because he won, and because the attack type he played does match the attack type of a card in the combat stack, at least just one of them. If it had matched multiple of them, he would get to take all of them. He gets to take that card and add that to the hero's damage stack as well. So all 3 of these cards will go into the hero's damage stack. So he now has 4 damage. This goes into the combat stack. Our hero now has 4 wounds. If he takes 1 more wound, he's going to be dead. But we're going to have another round of combat, so he'll draw 1 card to bring him up to 5. The golem has to draw 2 cards to bring himself up to 5. So 1, 2. Alright, the hero really doesn't have anything good. He'll play this 2 double strike, face down. The golem, he's going to play this card, so they'll both reveal. He plays the 3 fire blast. He plays the 2, so he's losing, but he does have a counterattack icon of the type that the golem played, so he can counterattack if he has any other cards with the symbol, the counterattack symbol, magic symbol, which he does. So that now brings him up to a 4, which now beats the 3 played by the golem. And now because he won, he can do a death blow by taking any cards in the combat stack that match his attack type. There are 2 melees, so he can take both of those. And he will add those. All 4 of these cards now go to the monster's damage stack, which puts him at 5. His health is only 4, so this player would say, alright, you defeated the monster. The golem's power card goes back to him. Lindell's power card goes back to him. The monster's token just gets shuffled back up in here with the other golem tokens. All the other combat cards that were used in the combat will get shuffled back into the combat deck. And Lindell's damage stack of 4 cards got converted into wounds, so still he can only take 1 more wound and he'll be killed. And I had this power, I forgot it back from my room. Discard at the start of any combat round. Move up to 3 cards from your damage stack into your opponent's damage stack. I forgot to do that. I should have done that. That would have saved me 3 of those wounds. But anyway, what's done is done. And that would end his turn. And we would go back to Chalara. We'll do 1 more turn for her. Alright, we'll say she's going to move this way, so she draws this dungeon tile. She gets a corridor, so she immediately moves again. She's going to move this way. She'll draw this dungeon tile. She got another corridor. She's going to immediately move again, so she will draw again. and she got this dungeon chamber. She'll move in there, and she will have to encounter that dungeon chamber. And she got a demon. You may attack or try to escape. If you attack or fail to escape, you must resolve the combat. We'll just try to escape. If it ends up being a combat, I'm just going to end it right there, so we don't have to take the time to go through another combat. But we will have her try to escape, so this player would get the demon power cards and shuffle them up. Well, actually we're not going to do that because Chilara has this power. When you draw a dungeon card, you may discard it and draw another card as replacement. You must then encounter the new dungeon card. So she's going to discard that one and draw another one as a replacement, and whew, she gets an empty room. So lucky for her, she got an empty room, does not have to encounter a demon, and she's getting pretty close to the dungeon chamber. And now we would go back to Lyndall, and he would draw another catacombs card. You know, he's got to try to find exit out of the catacombs. We'll just see what he draws. We'll advance one there. We'll just see what he draws, and then we'll probably wrap it up. Oh, we forgot her torch goes out. She had to do that at the start of her turn. Test luck to see if she really... Anyway, she didn't do that. We forgot that. And he got the same thing. So she should have tested her luck to see if she even got to continue her turn, or if she would have had to stop and go on. But anyway, I forgot to do that. It's hard to keep up with everything everybody has when you're playing solo and trying to video. But this should give you a good idea of how the game plays. You see Krutzbeck got killed right away. She's getting close. She might be able to get in there, grab something from the dragon's treasure room, and maybe quickly escape. I don't know about old Lyndall. He's in the catacombs, going the wrong way. I don't know. You know, hopefully he finds an exit soon. But I'm going to wrap it up. This game, as you can see, is pure luck. There's no strategy to this at all. So if you don't like games that are just, you know, pure luck and mayhem, then you would not like this. But if you occasionally like to play something that's just crazy and you never know what's going to happen, this can be pretty fun. But there's definitely no skill except maybe involved in the combat, which, as I said, a lot of people don't even like because it you know, takes away from the quick turns of the game, and so they use the alternate combat that's in the revised edition and the old edition. But thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.